You kind of mentioned the rhetoric that kind of sometimes gets in the way of agile thinking, and you have one of my favorite ones, which used to drive me. It was an absolute trigger quote, which was the old classic one. It's more important to be agile than to do agile. You want to give us a quick rundown on how you feel about that one?
Yeah, I mean, we've been going to agile conferences for literally decades. And one of the frustrating parts for us is that there's a lot of touchy-feely, huggy sessions about if we could just all get along better as a team, we're going to have awesome results. So that's the kumbaya, hold hands, and we're going to be wonderful. Well, at some point, like Scott likes to say, you can be agile all you want, but at some point you got to do it.
Yeah, you got to do the job.
And if
you're a marathon runner when you run kilometers, not when you buy the watch or the shoes or put on the little nifty shorts.
So, I get a kick. So you learn how to do great retrospectives where everybody's sharing what we did wrong and then how we're going to get better. And it's
keep, increase, stop, start. I remember that.
Yeah, but I paint a picture of a bunch of people who haven't invested time in learning ways of working beyond the 16-page Scrum guide, and all you've ever been taught is user stories. And you put those people in a room for sprint 97, because they've had 96 of these meetings, you're still not getting any better. Everybody's looking at each other saying, I don't know, we're getting along great. We're not fighting. I don't know why we're not, doing great agile. Well, maybe they need to open their eyes to new techniques, right? This is where, if a Scrum Master understands 17 different ways of doing requirements, they can bring another one to light. And by the way,
if most organizations would just have a Scrum Master, that might even help.
Yeah, and that Scrum Master who has to have a clue. Otherwise, you're not going to get any. By the way, and the Agile people don't want the Scrum Master giving out answers. No, the team has to figure it out for themselves. Well,
that's just stupid.
If they're ignorant about working, they're not going to figure it out. Yeah. It's no wonder that they struggle. So I said before, better decisions lead to better results. If you know what the ingredients are in the pantry, like you used to do mac and cheese, so you knew 4 or 5 ingredients. Try to make an exotic dish, right? You have no clue. You look in the pantry, you have no idea what saffron is. So teach people what's in the toolkit, help them to find answers to the situation, increase the amount of ingredients, and they'll be able to graduate beyond basic mac and cheese to building something that's more palatable to their users.
And so we would be teaching Disciplined Agile courses, right? So you'd go into a customer, and we'd be in there teaching a team, and invariably, half the workshops you'd end up with the Scrum Master, and and they knew everything. And they'd be sitting in the back of the room like this, right? And they introduce themselves, I'm John, the Scrum Master. I know everything, and I'm being forced to be here. And sometimes they come out and say it. Sometimes you could just tell by their attitude that they know everything, and that's okay, whatever. But invariably, what would happen, and almost always by the end of the first day, they would come up to us and they'd say, and they'd apologize, and they say, you know what? I thought you guys were wasting wasting my time. And here we are in the first day of the 2 or 3 day workshop, is whatever the situation was. And not only have you given us answers for 3 or 4 really hard problems that we've been struggling with for months, you gave us several options for each one. And so it blew their minds, and they've been trying to figure it out, because the Scrum community, there's just certain things they don't want to talk about, and so they've got these huge blind spots. And so, if you rely on just that narrow band of people, you're really hosed. And this happened in organization after organization after organization. Yep. And then we'd say, and you might want to hear, wait till tomorrow when we get into some of those swear words like governance and data and other things that I guarantee you're also struggling with, or finding.
Part of the problem is Scrum Master education and certification. The first one I went through, I can't stop telling the story. Great trainer, a little pompous sometimes, but a good trainer. Had written a book. We got lots of giveaways. 2 days, 30 people in the class. And I've told the story 100 times, but I can't, because it sticks with me. But at the end of the course, I was like, of the 30 people who are in this course, 2 people are actually going to be able to Scrum afterwards. And I was one of them. And which is funny, because I'm one of those, I'm one of those cantankerous, constructive, critical people who, says, "Why do I have to use a story point if the situation, if culturally the team is better with effort and duration?" Oh my God, that's sacrilege. I'm like, it's not a religious war, But
you had some
of the
real
30
skills.
people, 28, they kind of, they had fun for 2 days and they got a certification, but they would never. They're going to fail on the first thing, which is a story point, And they
had a great time playing games. Right.
Yeah.
They felt good about themselves. Like this. So, and this was setting the culture in the Agile community. It's not about getting the job done. It's about feeling good about yourself. Right. And Mark was saying, we'd have, be kumbaya, and we'd have, big group hugs and stuff like that. It's like, yeah, you feel good about failing. I don't want you to feel good about failing. I want you to feel good about delivering real value to your customers, and not just spinning that, but actually delivering and actually having metrics that show that they're happy, right? So it's not just so the Scrum guys like to talk about potentially shippable software. That's not what we're aiming for, right? We really need like consumable solutions that are being used and that people enjoy and are delighted by. It's not just we made our date, here's a bunch of crap, right? It's like, no, if you're not using it, you've still failed, right? If they're not happy with it, you've still failed. And there's more to it than just.
I told you guys off camera, but I'm going to tell it again on camera because it fits in the situation. I think it's going to also provide a little bit of a segue. I think one of the times where my consciousness really, was triggered, and I realized that you guys and Disciplined Agile was really something to look at besides, kind of reviewing it. And I had critical conversations I think I had like debates with myself and some of the things you wrote here. I was like, doing devil's advocate. What the heck? How can they write that? This is bullshit. And then I would think about it. And I said, well, if you look at it from this perspective, it makes sense. But one of the things that gave me an indication that you guys were really onto something was the people that I know that are certified according to Disciplined Agile. Okay. I know people who have 30 years plus project management experience who are really senior. They're at least on my level or even above my level, and they were going out and getting your certification. And that's the first time I was like, hey, it was kind of a very elite group of people who were really drifting towards Disciplined Agile, and that was kind of the proof is in the pudding. I guess it's one of the KPIs you can say that you were onto something. I want to kind of use what you said beforehand as a segue. I love the conversation so far. One of my missions for the podcast is to kind of also create a storyline that people can follow, that's easy to follow as they move forward. I still want people, I think we have to flesh out the Disciplined Agile a little bit. I don't think we have to go through the manifesto and the principles. People can read that themselves. There's some kernels, some big kernels of wisdom in there. But let's kind of see if we can maybe look at a little bit more of the framework, and then maybe talk about where I want to go to is if we can pique people's interest. One of the big questions I want to deep dive on a little bit with you is, okay, maybe I don't understand, but you have my attention, you have my interest. I've made a decision. I want to take a look at discipline. That we kind of look at, well, what would be the steps? How would an organization? What would be the 3, 4, 5 steps on how to move into the Disciplined Agile direction? But before that, maybe we can flesh it out a little bit so people can grasp it, make it a little bit more tangible. One of the things you have in your DAD, in your Disciplined Agile development thing is the life cycle concept. Okay, and when I first read the life cycle, I was like, oh, this is where the initiation, plan, execution, monitor, control, and closing comes in. But no, that's not what it is. This is your life cycle concept addresses the different flavors of ice cream. I don't know if the analogy is correct, right? And just for summary, and there's some nuances in here as well, right? So the first one I have is Agile, and there's many flavors of Agile. Then you have Agile continuous delivery, which I think is there's a hidden message in there that I'd love to hear. Then you have Lean, and when you guys said Lean, I was like, oh, now they've got me. I've got a whole section over here in Lean. I think that Lean That's one of the absolute development areas that a lot of companies need to include in their value delivery for project. It's just it's a really important process there should be some integration there. Then you have continuous lean delivery. Then you have exploratory, and you have program, which piqued my interest. Okay, first time I read it, I was like, where the hell is waterfall?
And I was missing, to be fair.
Could you just for those of us who are not familiar with Disciplined Agile, maybe kind of explain what was the driving idea behind the life cycle, and how do we need to understand, even if we don't have time to deep dive on each one of them?
Let me start, and then you can explain the difference between the 6.
Yeah.
So first of all, if you say that is 2,000 practices, you're like, what the hell? Where do I start? Well, you start with the life cycle. You start with.
Now, you've mentioned this, and I've let you slide on this. Sorry to interrupt you, Mark. When you mention 2,000 practices, that scares the hell out of people who don't know what. So what you're saying is, we're talking about the tip of the pyramid, right? We're talking about six life cycles. But when you break those down, you're eventually going to get to the bottom of the pyramid.
Well, just think about it. The cooking analogy is a good one, because you don't say, what am I going to have for dinner? Well, you could go into the pantry and say, what have I got and what can I make from it? But that's kind of like reverse engineering. You probably more say, like, I like pasta. I want some pasta today, but I'm sick of mac and cheese. So mac and cheese might be Scrum. It's like, we're going to start with the basics.
Yeah.
And now we're going, but we need something more exotic, because this is a regulatory situation. So I need more than what the Scrum guide gives me. So I need to look into that pantry and see, what do I need to toss into my mac and cheese recipe to make it more robust, more disciplined for my context. So and depending on your maturity, if you're brand new to Agile, you might start with a Scrum thing, and Scott's going to explain what we have for that. Or if you're more advanced, you might be doing lean. You might have leaned up the process, and you have technical capability for software development to spin stuff out on a regular basis. So depending on where you are in the capability maturity spectrum, and what you're comfortable with, and whether it's Scott will talk about project versus product approach, you're going to pick one of these starter recipes. That's what the life cycles are. And then you'll sprinkle in ingredients from the toolkit to customize it for your context. So
now,
the difference
are these life cycles mutually exclusive, or do they overlap too?
They overlap from a governance point of view. They also overlap from a transformation point of view. Okay. So you might start with like the Agile project life cycle because you believe it's a project. You believe you're Agile. You believe it's a project. Okay. But then over time, say you're actually following Scrum, right? But let's actually take them at their word for once. And if you're actually following Scrum, 6 months later, you better not. I don't want to see you following Scrum anymore, because you should have been improving. So you should have improved away from Scrum, right? More than likely into some sort of
just
lean
like
continuous
the Spotify way is no longer the Spotify way.